I came to in complete darkness, feeling not hard, but gentle slaps to my face. I was in a standing position with my arms tied behind my back, my 2 legs tied together at the ankles, and a rope tied tightly around my chest. I faintly heard the same old man from before, softly speaking Latin.
"Wake up! Come on, kid! Wake up!"
I heard a deep, raspy voice say. I thrust my body around violently from side to side and screamed.
"He's awake, father,"
that raspy voice said again.
"Reveal him to me,"
the old man said in English. Suddenly, the black mask was yanked from my head, the darkness was gone, and I could finally see my surroundings. I was in the basement of my parents' house, tied to the metal support beam that stood in the center of the room. The air was stale and musty. Before me stood Father Thomas, our neighbor, in full dress, holding a book open in his left hand that read Rite of Exorcism on the binding, and held a large vial filled with a clear liquid that I could only assume was holy water in his right hand. On either side of him stood 2 large refrigerator-looking guys dressed in all black that could have easily been mistaken for members of the Italian mafia. The afternoon sun cast a beam of light through one of the 4 basement windows directly onto me, like a suspect in some interrogation room that you see in the movies. There was a small video camera on a tripod set up on my right, with a red flashing light coming from it.
"What are you doing? Let me go!"
I yelled.
"Leave me with him,"
Father Thomas said to the 2 large men, who turned around, walked up the basement steps, and then exited through the basement door. He then opened a large vial of water and began dousing me with it as he started to read from the book, speaking in Latin once more. I don't speak and or understand Latin, so I couldn't tell you what he was saying. After a couple of minutes, Father Thomas slammed the book shut, stopped dousing with holy water, and said,
"Come forth, demon, and tell me your name."
"It's me, Michael, your neighbor. I have been my whole life," I stated with aggression.
"I command you, demon, in the name of the Holy Father, come forth and tell me your name,"
he shouted. I just looked at him. "I'm not possessed, Father," I said calmly. He then placed the book and the vial of water on a small pile of boxes that sat on the basement floor. He reached behind his back and produced a small wooden cross from his back right pocket, holding it in his right hand. He opened the large vial of water with his left hand, picked it up and began pouring it directly onto the cross until it was all gone. A small puddle of water lay on the basement floor. He then put the bottle back in the boxes, closed it, and grabbed the book. He opened it up and began speaking Latin once more. As he stepped forward quickly, raising the water-soaked cross in his right hand and slamming it hard against my forehead. The back of my head slammed hard against the metal pipe, my vision became blurry, and I started seeing stars before my eyes. I screamed in pain.
"Come forth, demon!"
he screamed directly in my face.
"I command thee, in the holy name of God, come forth and speak to me. Tell me your name. Do it. Do it. Do it now."
He held the cross to my forehead for what seemed like forever, repeating that same phrase over and over again, pushing the cross harder and screaming louder each time. "My name is Michael! You know me!" I screamed every time. After the 4th or 5th time, I began to whimper and cry. "I'm not possessed! I'm not possessed!" I said softly through my tears. Father Thomas then stepped back, removing the cross from my forehead and held it to his side. He just looked at me dumbfounded. I hung my head and cried. "I'm not possessed!"
"I see this, my son. I am sorry,"
he said softly. He closed his book, gathered his things, walked up the basement steps, and exited through the basement door, leaving me all alone and tied up. Apparently, when he left, he didn't shut the basement door properly. I could faintly hear a conversation going on upstairs. It was my mother, father, and Father Thomas.
"Your son is not possessed,"
Father Thomas said.
"If he was, the holy water I placed on his skin earlier would have burned his skin. It did not. I had my doubts when I began to apply it to his skin earlier, and nothing happened. But once this ritual is started, it has to be carried out." "But try again,"
my mother said.
"Father, please."
My dad said.
"I can't. Once I determine a demon is no longer present, any further attempts are considered torture and are actions not condoned by the church. I'm sorry, miss."
Name retracted for privacy, he said.
"Tony, please go untie him and meet Christopher and I Next door at my house. Yes, Father,
Tony said in that same deep, raspy voice. I heard the basement door open slowly, and loud footsteps coming down the basement stairs. Tony walked over to me, untied my hands, untied the rope around my chest, and then untied my legs. "I'm sorry for smacking you, kid," he said to me. I thought about kicking him between the legs, but as big as he was, it would probably break my foot. Instead, I pushed past him, furious about what had just happened. I ran up the basement steps and through the basement door, only to be met by my parents standing there in the living room. "What's wrong with you? How could you do this to me? I told you I wasn't possessed. That's it, I'm done. I'm out of here," I screamed at them. "I'm sorry, Michael," my mom said, crying. She turned to my father, placing her head on his shoulder, and he put one arm around her. "I'm sorry too," he mouthed to me. I just looked at him and shook my head. I ran to the laundry room, grabbed a couple large trash bags, and ran back upstairs to my room and threw all my Metal Gear and cassettes into one bag, put my songbooks in the other, grabbed my wallet and my keys, and I put them in my pockets. I grabbed the guitar, the plug-ins, the strap, and the amp. I opened my bedroom window and tossed the bags and guitar and stuff onto the roof of the porch, climbed out the window and tossed the bags off the roof. Luckily, the bags didn't break, and only a few plastic cassette cases were broken in the fall, and they were easy enough to replace. I shimmied down the drain pipe with the guitar, the strap, the plugins, and the amp in one hand while trying not to fall to my death with the other. It was hard, but I did it. I ran to my car, and I threw the guitar and stuff in the back seat, and I ran back and grabbed the bag, threw it in the front seat, and got in, fired her up, and tore out of there. I could see my parents running onto the front lawn waving their arms through the rearview mirror as I drove away. That was the last time I ever saw my parents. I left that day and never went back. I drove around for a while. In case you haven't realized, I like to drive. Oh, yeah, by the way, in case you're wondering where I got all my money for gas, cassettes, and Roses and Susan coffee, and things like that, remember when I said my tape collection was enormous? Well, I made a decent amount of money. Back then it was a decent amount. I copied music off cassettes using a dual cassette deck, and I would sell them at school. I charged $5 a tape and sold about 20 a week, give or take. Kids would ask if I had certain cassettes by a certain band, and if I did, I would copy it and sell it to them. Most of the time I did. I stopped doing it after I heard on the news that a kid in Nebraska got arrested for it and was sentenced to 3 years in prison for copyright infringement. Anyway, I had nowhere to actually go, so I decided to go hang out with Ricky at B&B Music, given the fact that he was my only friend. I mean, a dead friend, but like a friend nonetheless, you know. I drove over there, parked the car, and got out. Ricky was outside hanging this huge 20% off entire inventory banner across the front window. "Hey man, you need any help?" I asked him. "Dude, yeah, cool, thanks," he replied. "Is this straight?" he asked. Go up a little. A little more. Right there," I said. He tied it off, climbed down the ladder, and stepped back to check it out. "Works for me," he said. "What's up, dude? Why are you here so early?" he asked. "What time is it?" I asked. "A little after 3, he responded. I told him everything that happened that morning. He stood there, mouth wide open. "Holy fucking hell knockers, man, that's fucking crazy," he said, and then asked, "Are you alright, dude?" I will be, yeah, I said. I can't believe my parents did that to me. They've always been so cool, you know? "Yeah, man, that was bogus, what they did. Pops might be strict as hell, but he ain't never done crazy shit like that," Ricky stated, shaking his head. "Where you gonna go, dude?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied. "I guess I could sleep in the car, man. I don't know," I said emotionally. The realization of what I just did began to sink in. I started walking nervously back and forth, shaking my arms. Ricky stepped in front of me, stopping me with his hands. "Dude, don't stress it right now. We'll figure something out, okay? Come inside," Ricky said. "I could really use a cup of coffee right now," I said. "Pop's got a coffee maker in the back. He drinks that shit all day long. I'm sure he's got some made. He won't mind if you have some," Ricky said. "Okay," I replied. We went inside, went to the back, and sure enough, Ricky's dad had just made a pot. We sat down at the small table near the restroom. Mr. Bellington came walking up. "Hey, Marky," he said. "Everything okay, son?" "It's been a really rough day, sir. I replied.
Where's some coffee, son? Coffee makes everything all right,
he said with a chuckle. Thank you, sir. I will, I responded. I got up to make a cup.
Hey, Pop,
Ricky said suddenly.
What are the chances I can get off early today? Mikey's in a rough spot, and we need to figure a few things out. What's going on, son?
Ricky's dad asked as I made my cup. No, it's nothing, sir. I'll be all right, I replied. I sat back down to the table.
Well, if you need anything, you let me know, all right?
He said. Yes, sir. I will, sir. Thank you, I told him.
Oh, heck. Go ahead, you two. Get out of here. Go on, get. I hope it all works out for you, son,
he said. I grabbed a cup of coffee off the table as Ricky stood up.
Thanks, Pop,
Ricky said as we started to leave. We got to the car and put the bags in the trunk, then we got in and drove off. We decided to go to Derek and Corey's place. Now it was Stefan's place, too. Ricky told me how to get there. We arrived at the house just as the storm was beginning to roll in. The house looked as haunted as the rumor said it was. It was a large 2-story Victorian-style house. Well, 3 stories if you count the attic. It was dark gray in color with a dark blue trim. An old black iron fence surrounded the whole property and had a few dead trees in the side yard with a couple black crows sitting on the branches. It resembled the Munster house from that old TV show. It was creepy as fuck, even in the daytime. I could only imagine what it looked like at night, but it was cool as hell. Totally metal. Is this their house? I asked Ricky, looking at it in awe.
Yeah, man, ain't it awesome?
He answered. The storm clouds moved in quickly. Yeah, I said. Let's get inside before the storm hits.
Mind your 6, dude,
he replied. That's military talk for it, right behind you. Except the dude part. We ran into the front door. Ricky didn't even knock. He just walked in. I followed. We walked in and the whole house smelled like marijuana. Derek and Corey were sitting on the couch smoking a joint while Stefan sat in the chair drinking a beer. There was a large drum kit set up behind the couch against the back wall, along with a bass guitar, 4 microphones, and 3 electric guitars, an acoustic guitar, and several amps.
I'm gonna grab a beer,
Ricky said.
You want one?
He asked me. Nah, man, I don't drink, I replied.
Are you on a hit?
Corey asked, blowing out the smoke. No, I'm good. I'm good on that too, I said, waving my hand in front of my face. Stefan chuckled and said, Well, you don't drink, you don't smoke. Well, what do you do? Suddenly, that Adam Ant song came to mind. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. I drink coffee, I said. All 3 of them shouted in unison.
Coffee?
Well, yeah, but I drink a lot of it, I said, trying to sound cool, failing miserably.
That's cool, man. You can be the designated driver.
Yeah, you know what? That works. Okay, I said. Ricky came back, beer in hand, and sat down on the floor. The storm was moving fast. I looked out the front window. Thunder was roaring in the distance as the skies grew dark. The house was getting dark as well. Stefan turned on a lamp that was sitting next to him on a table. Suddenly, a loud lightning bolt hit close by, causing the house to shake as the rain began to fall. Is this place really haunted? I asked loudly. No one answered. Stefan then screamed out,
Rock and roll, let's get this party started.
All 4 of them jumped up, ran behind the couch. Stefan went behind the drum kit, Derek grabbed the bass, Ricky grabbed a guitar, and Corey stood behind the microphone. Where's your gear? Stefan yelled as another lightning strike hit, causing the lights to flicker. Fuck, it's in the car, I told him. I ran out the front door in the pouring rain and ran to my car. I was just about to pull my gear out of the back seat when something caught my eye. It looked like a person standing in the window of the attic, looking down at me. I blinked and shook my head as I grabbed my gear, and I ran back into the house. Is anyone here besides us? I asked no one in particular. They all stared at me. The skies were black as night now. The thunder roared continuously. As the rain came down harder and faster with every passing second, another lightning strike. And just before the lights went out, I swear I saw someone standing in the kitchen doorway. Did you see that? I said into the darkness.
See what?
Ricky said, lighting his lighter and holding it up in the air. Stefan, Corey, and Derek all did the same. The room became dimly lit, and it looked like a scene from a rock concert. I didn't have a lighter, so I just stood there. Where's your lighter? Stefan asked me. Oh, right, never mind. Did you see that black figure standing in the kitchen? I stammered out to no one in particular. Oh, you mean Johnny? Corey said, smirking. At least that's what we call him, after Johnny Cash. You know, the man in black. He don't hurt nobody, so we just leave him alone. There is something about Johnny Cash's music that metalheads just go crazy for. Folsom Prison Blues, Ring of Fire, One Piece at a Time, just to name a few. They might be considered country music to most people, but damn, those songs rock. Anyway, yeah, we only see when we're completely toasted, Derek said. You must have caught a contact high or something, dude. What, are you kidding me? I thought to myself. The sound of thunder roared in the distance as the sky became clearer and the room once again filled with sunlight. All four of them extinguished their lighters and put them back in their pockets. That was one wicked-ass storm, man, Stefan said. Came right out of nowhere. Suddenly, the power came back on. Yeah, man, Derek shouted. Rock and roll! He howled like a wolf. The other three followed in suit, and so did I. And for the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I belonged. Yeah, man, you're one of us now, Derek said, and then high-fived me. I smiled. I looked around the room. If these guys actually made a deal with the old man, I thought, wouldn't they all have something snake-skinned? But there was nothing. Everything was normal looking. Derek then pulled another joint out of his front right pocket, lit it, hit it, and then passed it to Corey. I'm getting another beer, Ricky stated, and then ran to the kitchen. Get me one too, Stefan yelled. Plug your gear in over there, dude. Let's jam, Stefan said excitedly as he twirled his drumsticks between his fingers. I plugged my amp into the wall socket, plugged in the guitar, strapped it up, and stood there. What are we going to play? Anything you want, dude, Ricky said, swallowing his beer, handing Stefan his, putting down his bottle, and picking up his guitar. Haven't you ever jammed out with your friends before? No. I don't really have any friends except you guys, I said, sounding like a complete loser. Hey man, whatever show you've been living in, we're about to bust this fucker wide open, Derek said. You're one of us now. You're not just in a band, you're in this band. We don't care what you look like. We don't care what you do. We don't care what you don't do. We just want to have some fun and play some kick-ass rock and roll, right guys? Yeah! They all said in unison. Derek actually spoke like a normal person, not nearly the pissed off guy I met at the church. Count it off, Stefan, Derek said. Stefan then hit the drumsticks together and yelled out, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and began playing a rhythmic drum beat. Derek looked at me and said, feel the rhythm. He held his bass up and then thumped it to the same rhythm as the drums, nodding his head as well. Ricky started playing in rhythm. Corey began vocalizing. I stood there, letting the music engulf me. I began playing, going along with the rhythm. I really started getting into it, feeling all the sounds of all the instruments coming together to form a symphony of emotion within myself. I was the happiest I'd been in a long time. Well, except for my time with Susan, that is. I was so happy, I actually thought I was going to cry. But I wasn't going to do that in front of these guys. That would be a big mistake. We all jammed out for about half an hour, everyone throwing solos in here and there. I couldn't get the smile off my face. And after our jam session, we all sat in the living room. You sure you don't want something to drink, dude? Ricky asked me. I just saw a ghost, and I may be stoned, I thought to myself. I could really use a cup of coffee, I replied. Oh, we don't have a coffee pot? There's a jar of instant in the kitchen cabinet, left behind from the previous tenants. I don't know how long it's been in there, but it's all yours, man, Corey said, taking another hit. Cool. Something's better than nothing, right? I said. I got up and walked to the kitchen, found the coffee in the cabinet, grabbed an old styrofoam cup sitting on the counter, dumped it out, rinsed it out, filled it with water, and put it in the microwave for a minute and a half, and then put a spoonful of coffee in it and stirred it up. There was no milk in the fridge, but there was a large canister of sugar on the counter, so I drank it black with sugar. Instant coffee really sucks. Only beggars can't be choosers, right? I walked back into the living room. I feel like blowing some speakers, man. Hey, Mikey, what do you want to hear? Ricky asked. Oh, I don't care, I replied, as long as it rocks. Molly Crew it is, Ricky said, throwing up the horns with his right hand. We all did the same. A little bit of a shout at the devil. He turned the volume up to 10 and then hit play on the tape deck. It was so fucking loud. It was great. We all started speaking along with Nicky Six as he said the lines to In the Beginning, the intro to Shout at the Devil. The song began, and we all started headbanging and thrashing around, singing the words and screaming, Shout! 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 When the song ended, Ricky hopped up and then turned the volume down a little bit as Looks That Kill began to play, and then asked, Did you bring your songbooks with you? I took a drink of my coffee and said, Yeah, they're in my car. I jumped up and ran to the car, opened the trunk and grabbed both bags, then shut the trunk. I saw Johnny standing in the attic window again when I looked up. I waved to him and ran back in the house, a bag in each hand. I opened the songbook bag and dumped them on the floor. Damn, dude, that's a lot of songs, Corey said. Let me see one. Oh, me too, said Derek.
Me 3,
said Ricky, snickering. I gave them all a book, even Stefan.
Well, these are pretty good, Derek said. Damn good.
I smiled. Thanks, I said.
We'll start arranging some of these tomorrow, Ricky said. Right, guys?
Definitely. They all replied at the same time. That's awesome, I said. My happiness came to an abrupt end, and there was a loud pounding on the front door.
Sheriff's Department, open the door.
A voice yelled from the other side of it.
Shit, it's the cops,
Corey said.
Hide the weed.
Everybody scrambled, hiding the bag of weed under the couch cushion, spraying air freshener, dumping the ashtrays, and pouring the beer down the sink. Ricky turned off the stereo.
Mikey, you're the soberest. You answer the door,
Stefan said, as they all sat in the exact places they were before. Be cool, man, Derek said. Another series of loud pounds on the door startled me.
Sheriff's Department, open the door now.
The voice yelled even louder. I opened the door. Reggie, the town sheriff, was standing in the doorway.
We got a call complaining about blaring music coming from this resident. Lord have mercy, you boys having a party in here or what?
He said. What? Derek said.
Very funny, young man. Now where is it?
Reggie said with his best sheriff voice as he walked into the house. You can't just walk in here. You need a warrant or something, don't you? Stefan said.
I smell marijuana. That gives me probable cause, which means I can come in and search this place without a warrant if I want to,
Reggie replied. He's right, guys, I said. They all just stared at me, including Reggie, who turned around to stare at me. What? I said. I watched a lot of Miami Vice. Reggie turned back around and said,
Okay, last time, where is it?
No one said a word.
All right, hands on the wall. Everybody don't move,
Reggie instructed. Ricky and I ran to the wall. I thought about using my gift of want, but I decided to see how this played out. Stefan got up nonchalantly and walked over. Derek and Corey looked at each other, smiled, and jerked themselves up with a hop and a fling of their hair, and then walked like supermodels to the wall. I had a feeling they'd been through this before. Reggie started to search the living room area, moving the furniture, looking in drawers, tossing my books in the air. He actually got down on his knees, turned on his flashlight, and looked inside each one of the drums on the drum kit. Stefan snickered as Reggie continued to search. We were all standing there, hands on the wall. Ricky was to my left, Stefan to Ricky's left, and then Derek, and last was Corey. I turned my head to look at them, and that's when I noticed they all had the same snake tattoo on their right bicep. Before I could say anything, Reggie said loudly,
And there it is, under the couch cushion. It's always under the couch cushion. I should have looked there first.
We all turned our heads to see Reggie standing there holding the bag of weed and smiling.
Let me guess. It's oregano, right? You boys should have just said no, he remarked. All of you are going for a ride. Sheriff Jackson to dispatch, he said into his shoulder mic.
Go, Sheriff, a voice said from the speaker.
I need a patrol car to 19 Chestnut Street for transport, please, Reggie said.
Well, now I don't want to have to try to find another place to stay, I thought. Reggie then began to pat down and search all of us, finding nothing except 2 joints in Corey's front right pocket. Now, you have to remember that this all happened during the Nancy Reagan Just Say No countrywide campaign against drugs. A small bag like that got you in some serious time. Unlike today's times, a little bag like that gets you a slap on the wrist. The patrol car arrived and the officer entered the house.
Give me your cuffs,
Reggie said to her. I'd never seen her before. She was blonde and looked very similar to Heather Locklear's character in the show T.J. Hooker. She wasn't my type, but she was cute. She did, and Reggie handcuffed Stefan and Corey together, and Derek and Ricky together. He then looked at me and said,
I don't have enough cuffs for you, but if you run, I'll shoot you dead, got it?
Yes, sir, but I didn't do anything.
You don't have to, son. You're guilty by association, he said. A controlled substance was found in the house, which you were occupying when said substance was found. By law, it belongs to all of you, and you all will be charged with possession of a controlled substance. You can argue your case in front of the judge Monday morning. Now, everybody, show some ID.
I reached into my back pocket and took out my wallet and opened it, took out my license and handed it to him.
We're handcuffed together. How are we supposed to do that?
Stefan asked.
Boys, you gotta stop smoking that wacky weed. It's affecting your brain cells. Use your free hand,
Reggie said and shook his head. They did, and gave their license to him. Except for Ricky, who only had a state ID. Reggie thumbed through them, and when he got to mine, he looked at the name and asked,
Aren't you Gerald and Mary's kid? You drive that Mustang out front, right?
Yes, sir, I replied.
I followed you through town a few days ago, right? He asked.
Yes, sir.
Oh, don't worry, son. They'll take real good care of it in the impound, and that truck too, he said with a smirk on his face. You take these two, he said to the female officer, as he lightly pushed Stefan and Corey in her direction. And I'll take these two, he said, as he grabbed Ricky by the arm and led him out the door. Then the female officer followed with her two. My pops is gonna kill me, Ricky whined, obviously forgetting that he was already dead. Let's go, son. We ain't got all day, Reggie said to me. I followed closely behind them after shutting the front door. The female officer loaded Steven and Corey into her car. Reggie put Derek, Ricky, and myself in his Blazer and drove us to the police station. The female officer followed close behind. Now, when you think of a police station, you probably think of the police stations that you see on television shows, such as Law & Order or NYPD Blue, even Chicago PD. But I'm from a small town. Our police station back then was an old 2-story house, built in the 70s, converted into a police station. The jail cells were in the basement, the local police station was on the main floor, and the courtrooms were on the top floor. So we arrived at the station. Reggie and the female officer led us down to the jail cells. I had been in the police station itself on a field trip in junior high several years ago, and I must say it was still very nice, neat, and well organized for a station. The jail cells, on the other hand, were far from that. Reggie and the female officer led us to the back of the station. Reggie then produced a slew of keys from his right hip and unlocked the steel-barred door, which led to the jail cells in the basement. And don't we get a phone call or something? Stefan asked. Phone's broke, the female officer said. Then how'd you get the call about the noise complaint? Derek asked with an attitude. Reggie grabbed him by the front of his shirt, stepped in his face, looked him in the eye, and said sternly, Phone's broke. Got it. Derek shook his head nervously. Yeah, man, I got it, he said. Reggie then told me to go first, and I did. I walked down the old wooden staircase, and the rest followed. The smell of rotten sewage, mold, and urine filled my nose. How the smell didn't seep into the station, I don't know. All 5 of us started to cough, as well as the female officer. Reggie seemed unfazed by it, though. There were 4 cells down there, 2 on the left and 2 on the right, with a walkway in the middle. The exterior walls were made of cinder blocks. Metal pipes lined the ceiling, which leaked a slimy brown water into the jail cells. Various puddles of water covered the floor. There was a small window at the top of each cell that I assumed were the basement windows, when it was actually a basement. There was an old beat-up desk with a chair at the bottom of the stairs where a big fat Jabba the Hutt-looking guy sat in a cop's uniform, eating. On the desk was an old black rotary phone, a small reading lamp, a notepad, and a styrofoam food container with some nasty-looking brown and green slop in it, and the guy was eating. How he could eat with that smell was beyond me. Otis, the town drunk, was in the first cell on the left, most likely sleeping it off. Some corporate suit monkey-looking guy was in the cell across from Otis on the right. The other 2 cells were empty until we were put in them. Corey and Stefan in one, Derek, Ricky, and myself in the other. Each cell had 2 fold-up cots, a small metal sink, and a round hole in the center of the floor, about the size of a wall clock, with a roll of toilet paper next to it. I found out the hard way what the hole was for when Otis woke up and took a shit over the hole, in front of everyone. Don't give Tiny here any trouble, boys, and you'll all get along just fine, Reggie said. Tiny looked at us and smiled, that nasty green mess stuck in his teeth, dropping out of the corners of his mouth. Yep, I think he said. I couldn't really tell with all that slop in his mouth. Good night, boys, Reggie said sarcastically, as he and the female officer walked off up the stairs, Tiny checking her out as she did. He laughed and then went back to eating. About an hour went by, and the sun was beginning to set, and the cells were getting darker by the minute. There was still enough light to see, though. Derek and Corey were both scratching at the walls as cinder dust fell to the floor. Stefan was leaning up against the bars of the cell, singing, I'm in the jailhouse now. Johnny Cash did a cover version of that song. I told you metalheads like Johnny Cash. Ricky was laying down on the cot that I was sitting on. I tapped him on the back and said, Hey, Ricky. He then sat up and replied, What, man? Why do you all have snake tattoos? I asked. I don't know, man. When we all crawled out of our graves after making that deal with the old man, we noticed we had these tattoos. We can't figure out what they mean, or where they even came from, Ricky said. I sat there thinking about it. The old man's shoes were snake-skinned. I made a deal with the old man and got a snake-skin guitar, just like my old friend Ricky. And these guys made a deal with the old man and got a snake tattoo. Then it hit me. They didn't get anything snake-skinned. They were snake-skinned. Okay. That makes sense, I thought. I stood up and walked to the window and stood on my tiptoes to see out of it. The sky was completely dark now,
but the street was lit up by several streetlights. In the dim lighting, I could see 2 different tow trucks from Toby's towing service towing my Mustang and Steven's truck past the police station and down the street to their shop. Suddenly, the phone on the desk rang.
That lying sack of shit! I knew their phones weren't broke!
Derek yelled out. Tiny swallowed what was in his mouth, grabbed his nightstick, stood up and yelled,
"Shut up, you punk! Or I'll give you something to yell about! Fucking pig!"
Derek mumbled to himself and continued scratching at the wall. Tiny then sat down and answered the phone.
"Yes, sir. Right away, sir,"
he said into the receiver, and then hung up the phone. He threw his food container away, opened the top left drawer of his desk, grabbed a small set of keys out of it, stood up holding his nightstick, and began walking down the walkway towards our cells.
"Mitchell, Ramsey, Shimadowski, Bellington,"
name retracted for privacy, he said in a deep, menacing voice.
"Charges have been dropped. There's someone here to see you."
"Who? No one knows we're here," Stefan said.
"I don't know. You'll find out when you go up there and let's go,"
Tiny said as he unlocked the jail cell doors, and then we all walked out.
"What about me?"
the suit monkey guy said.
"I've been here for 3 weeks. I didn't get a phone call. I don't know my charges, and I haven't seen a judge yet. Why aren't you keeping me here?"
Tiny then took his nightstick and hit it hard against the bars of his cell.
"Shut your mouth or I'll bash your head in. Your time's coming,"
he yelled at the guy. The man backed up quickly and sat down on his cot. As I walked by his cell on my way upstairs, I took a good look at the man. Mid-40s maybe, black hair, wearing a white button-up shirt and a black jacket, with black pants and a red tie hanging loosely around his neck, and a pair of black dress shoes. He held something dark in his hand, but I couldn't see what it was. We got to the bottom of the stairs.
"Go up the stairs, rattle the door, and someone will let you out,"
Tiny said. We did, and the female officer unlocked the door, shook her head, and grabbed her jacket off the back of the chair. "Good night, Sheriff," she said, turning back to us, shaking her head again, and then left. In retrospect, I think she was trying to tell us something. Anyway, we all walked into the police station.
"Man, let's get the fuck out of here,"
Corey said.
"Yeah, before they try and lock our asses up again,"
Derek remarked. We all nodded our heads and began to walk towards the door.
"Not so fast, boys,"
Reggie said.
"There's a stipulation to your release."
"What the hell does that mean?" Stefan asked.
"Brain cells, boys, brain cells,"
Reggie commented and laughed. We all turned to our left to see Reggie sitting at his desk, laughing, holding a large stack of $100 bills, which he then formed into a fan and began fanning himself with it in one hand and tossing our IDs to the side of the desk with the other. Derek grabbed the pile and handed ours to each of us.
"You boys are worth a lot of money to this guy,"
he said, pointing to the bulletin board. We all turned our heads in that direction. Standing there with his back to us was a heavy-set guy, wearing brown loafers, a pair of white socks pulled all the way up to his knees, a pair of beige khaki shorts, a hideous Hawaiian-styled flowery shirt, and a straw hat with a thick light blue ribbon around it. He looked like some old tourist from Florida.
"Gentlemen,"
he said in a low, gravelly voice as he turned around. He had a rather striking resemblance to Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick, complete with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Now, Bunny Carlos is a cool-ass dude, but this guy, however, looked like some creepy white van driving Pet My Puppy used car salesman from Florida. He took a drag from his cigarette, blew out the smoke, and walked towards us.
"It's so nice to finally meet all of you. I've heard so much about you,"
he said happily, which made him more creepy.
"Who the fuck are you?"
Corey said with aggression.
"Oh, I love your attitude,"
he said.
"The name's Robert Bells, 1 L, with a Z. You can call me Bob."
He smiled, and then shook his head excitedly.
"And you are Derek Mitchell, Stefan Ramsey, Cornelius Simadowski, Richard Bellington, and Michael,"
name retracted for privacy, pointing at each one of us.
"Did I get that right? Your names and all?"
"Yeah, man," Derek said. "Calm down." He took another drag of his cigarette, blew it out, and then put it out on the bottom of his shoe, and then put the butt in the pocket of his shorts.
"I can't,"
he replied.
"I'm just so excited to finally meet you guys."
"Why us?" Stefan asked. We are about to make beautiful music together, he said. Whoa, dude, we don't roll like that, Ricky said with a nervous look on his face. Not like that, you idiot. I am the owner of Hellfire Records. I want to sign you to a contract, he responded. How did you know we were even a band? We've only jammed together once. We haven't even played our first gig yet, I said. Yeah, our first gig is next Saturday. They're paying us $500, Derek announced. Bob chuckled. 500. Don't worry about that gig. You're not going to make it. Besides, if you sign with me, you'll be playing many more gigs that pay a lot more money. Now, to answer your question, Bob said, pointing at me. A very old friend of mine told me all about you and where to find you. You come very highly recommended, he replied. I've never heard of you or your record label. Why the fuck should we go with you? Derek asked aggressively. More attitude, I love it. We're a small independent label, but we distribute worldwide. And well, let's see, you have one of two choices here, boys. One, you can stay here and return to your nasty, disgusting jail cell and try to avoid a prison sentence when you talk to the judge on Monday. Or two, you can come with me, he said. The choice is yours. I'll wait, and besides, I just spent a shitload of cash for you guys. That should count for something, right? We all looked at each other, shrugged our shoulders, and looked back at him. I don't have anywhere else to go, I said. Bust that fucker wide open, right, Derek? Hell yeah, man, he said. Rock and roll! Yeah! The rest of them responded in unison and high-fived each other. Derek and I as well. Excellent choice, boys, Bob said, smiling. I'm gonna miss my pops, Rick said sadly. Oh, don't worry, boys. It'll be at least about a week or so. Then you'll come back and continue on with your lives. Well, at least until the tour starts, he assured us. Tour? We all said in unison. We don't even have an album out yet, Stefan said. Oh, but you're going to, Bob said, nodding his head furiously. In 1 week? Stefan replied. There's no fucking way. Boys, we can talk about that later, Bob said. Right now, let's get you out of here. Right this way. Motioning towards the door. We walked toward the door. Bob opened it and held it open for us as we all walked out into the shadows of the night. I love that song. Pat Benatar rocked. She wasn't metal, but she could have been. Right around the corner here, boys, Bob said and walked to the side of the building. We followed. Ta-da! Bob said, sounding like a big goober. Your chariot awaits. As he turned the corner, we reached the side of the building, turned to our left, and there, right in front of us, was the longest, blackest, and coolest jet black stretch limousine I had ever seen. Bob tapped on the back passenger side window. We heard the doors unlock and Bob opened the door as we all stepped inside. Derek went first. I'd never seen anything like that before. It had wraparound, all-leather seats, tinted windows, recessed lighting, a small water cooler with paper cups on the side, 2 reclining chairs towards the front, one on each side of the limo, a mini fridge with a glass door stocked full with bottles of Budweiser in between the chairs, a coffee pot on top of the fridge with a large can of Maxwell House coffee sitting beside it, as well as a small metal tray with filters, 2 small cream and sugar containers, styrofoam cups, and a spoon. There was a black push-button phone that hung on the wall near the passenger side chair. A small digital clock with red numbers hung on the wall near the driver's side chair. It also had a large island-like table in the center with multiple cartons of cigarettes and about 20 bags of various drugs on it, multiple bags of weed with a couple stacks of rolling papers and a pile of lighters next to them, several bags of all different colored pills all mixed together, and about 5 or 6 hypodermic needles filled with some kind of liquid, with a pile of blue flexible plastic straps, like they use when you get your blood drawn at the hospital, and sitting next to them, and a huge brick of white powdery substance which I'm sure was not sugar or flour. That's right. Loud, but not too loud, metal music played through the speakers. Holy fucking fuck, Derek said as he got in and sat down. Whoa, shit, we all remarked as we each got in, and then sat down as well. Bob was last to enter, shutting the door behind him. He took a seat in one of the recliners and said, "Welcome to Hellfire Records, boys. There's more where this came from." "This is all for us?" Stefan asked inquisitively. "Hell yeah. Call it, an incentive," Bob said, smiling. "Have at it, boys. We've got a long ride ahead of ourselves," as he knocked on the tinted glass that separated the driver from where we were. "Who's driving this thing?" Ricky said, as he and Stefan got up to get a beer. Ricky grabbed a pack of smokes as well. "No need to worry about that," Bob said. "It's a party after all. Isn't that what rock and roll's all about?" At that point, the limo began to move. "Does the phone work?" Ricky asked. Yes, it does. You can call anywhere in the world for free," Bob answered. "Cool, gotta call my pops," Ricky said as he got up and went to the phone, picked it up, and punched the numbers into the phone. A few seconds went by, and then Ricky said, "Hey, Pop, it's Richard. Mikey and I are going on a road trip with the rest of the guys, the band."
A road trip?
"Yeah, Pop.
With your head bopping buddies?
My head bopping buddies. Yeah.
For how long?
For about a week or so.
Okay.
Are you going to be okay at the store without me?"
I think I'll be alright. You have some fun now, son.
"Okay, Pop. I will. I'm not exactly sure where we're going, but if they have a souvenir shop, I'll get you a coffee cup."
Thanks, son. Be safe.
Okay.
Bye, son.
Bye, Pop. Love you.
Love you too, son.
Ricky said, and then hung up the phone and went back to his seat. "Oh, how sweet," Bob remarked as Ricky passed. "Shut up," Ricky replied. Bob snickered. "Everything all right, man?" Derek asked. "Yeah, Pop's cool with it," Ricky answered. "Awesome, dude. Let's party," Derek yelled. Corey and Derek grabbed a bag of weed and some papers. "Oh, we don't do that hard stuff, man," Corey said. "We just get toasted and mellow out." "Yeah, man," Derek remarked. "Put that shit away." Bob removed the brick and the needles and the straps and the bags of pills from the table and put them in the drawer underneath the recliner. Derek and Corey then rolled a few joints and got wasted and laughed for no reason. Stefan and Ricky chain smoked and got completely shit-faced drunk. Until they both passed out. Ricky's head falling back against the window. Stefan's head falling in Ricky's lap. I wish I had a camera at the time. That was hilarious. Even Bob snickered. Anyway, I made a pot of coffee, drank it, and relaxed. We all talked, told jokes, rocked out to the music, laughed and had a good time. At one point, Bob looked at me and said, "Don't you want any of these incentives, young man? They're free." "No, thank you. I'm not a partier. I'm good with coffee," I replied. "You're going to be the hard sell, aren't you? There's always one in the group," Bob said in a snippy tone, and just sat there, watching what was going on and staring at me on occasion. 2 hours and 37 minutes went by. The phone on the wall rang, and Bob picked it up and said, Very well. Thank you," and hung up the phone. Boys, wake up, pay attention. "We're here," Bob said, grinning. Stefan slowly lifted his head off Ricky's lap, just as Ricky lifted his head off the window. "Dude, what the fuck are you doing, man?" Ricky said, surprised and half awake. "I guess I passed out," Ricky mumbled, wiping his lip. "On my lap, dude. That's so uncool," Ricky stated, sliding away from Stefan. We all laughed, even Bob. The drool on Stefan's lip made it even funnier. "That was some funny shit, man," Corey said, stoned out of his mind. "Yeah, funny shit," Derek said and laughed uncontrollably. Boys, Bob said sternly. "Look at me." All 5 of us did as we were told. Bob then snapped his fingers. Immediately after, Corey, Derek, Stefan, and Ricky sat up at full attention. I just sat there. "Talking about a buzzkill, man," Stefan said. "What the fuck was that?" "Shut up," Bob said, his voice deep with hints of anger in it, his eyes cold, screaming with seriousness. "You boys had your fun, now it's time for business. Get out," Bob instructed harshly. Corey opened the door and we all piled out of the limo. It must have looked like a parking lot scene from the movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, with all the smoke pouring out. And no, that's not the best part of the movie. We all know what the best part of the movie was. And if you don't, watch the movie. You'll see what I'm talking about. So anyway, there we were, standing on the side of some old back road surrounded by trees, illuminated by moonlight, covered in fog. "Where the fuck are we?" Derek said, looking around. "Fuck if I know," Stefan responded, doing the same. Hell, we all were. "Boys," Bob said sternly from behind us. We all turned around to see Bob leaning out of the limo door that we had just came out of. Go straight through those trees there for about 20 feet. You'll come to a clearing, step into the clearing, and wait. We all turned back to look at the trees and then back to look at the limo, and it was gone. Completely gone. No signs of it anywhere. Not down the long stretch of road to the left. Not down the long stretch of road to the right. Nowhere. Just vanished. Into thin air. What the fuck? We all mumbled to ourselves. Suddenly, the wind began to howl as the trees swayed back and forth. Vultures began circling around the skies, cawing and diving down fast and swooping back up. The fog was growing thicker by the second. My mind shot back to the dark, foggy forest I saw in the dreamscape as the rain began to fall. Hard. Very hard. We all tried covering our heads with our arms as we ran into the trees. We were all standing next to each other on the side of the road before we entered the trees, but once inside, the others disappeared. I could hear each of them calling out to the other four, and I started doing the same as I began moving forward. It was pitch black in there, no moonlight shining down, nothing, not even fog. I began to hear a low growling coming from all around me, and then what appeared to me little white lights from the tops of the trees and the branches. I heard the sound of breaking twigs as if something heavy was stepping on them heading in my direction. I began walking faster. I removed my arm from the top of my head once I realized it was no longer raining in the trees, which was impossible, but with everything that happened the last week or so, it didn't really surprise me. What Bob said about 20 feet had to have been much more than that. I walked in complete darkness, seeing those lights, hearing that growling, tripping over tree roots and falling branches for about an hour. Falling down several times until I began to see a dim red light coming through the trees, about 10 feet ahead of me. I forged ahead, reaching the end of the trees and the entrance to the clearing. The red light, which was actually a beam of light, appeared to be coming from the direct center of the clearing, shining upwards from the ground. The intensity of that light was blinding. I covered my eyes with my right hand as I stepped into the clearing. The second I did so, the light disappeared. The growling stopped and the lights in the treetops were gone. I was standing in the clearing, moonlight shining down, all by myself.